Again, look to the Lord in word of prayer, and as we do, Sister Alana, would you voice that prayer?
Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you for this day, and I thank you, Lord, for bringing us all here to hear us this evening to help us know that you are our
turn our Bibles to 1 Timothy chapter 3. 1 Timothy 3, beginning in verse 1, this is a true saying, if a man desire the office of a bishop, he desireth a good work. A bishop then must be blameless, a husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, good behavior, given to hospitality, apt to teach, not given to wine, no striker, not greedy of filthy lucre, but patient, not a brawler, not covetous, one that ruleth well his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity. For if a man know not how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God? Not a novice, lest being lifted up with pride he fall into the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must have a good report of them which are without, lest he fall into reproach and the snare of the devil. And then, again, let's read Titus chapter 1. Beginning in verse 6, says, if any be blameless, a husband of one wife, having faithful children, not accused of riot or unruly. For a bishop must be blameless as the steward of God, not self-willed, not soon angry, not given to wine, no striker, not given to filthy lucre, but a lover of hospitality, a lover of good men, sober, just, holy, temperate, holding fast the faithful word as he hath been taught, that he may be able by sound doctrine both to exhort and to convince the gainsayers. So, the overview there, once again, of the qualifications of the office of the bishop. And we have, in a couple sessions, gone through the qualifications down through 1 Timothy 3, verse 5. We'll finish this up here tonight. So, not a novice, in verse 6 it says. So, kind of had a little bit of brainstorming and have several, quite a bit of notes that I wrote down. Apologize. Forgot to silence my phone. And so we'll spend a little bit more time on this one than we have on the others. It says, not a novice, lest being lifted up with pride. And so novice, in the Greek, the way that word was translated, arrived at as novice, is newly planted or a young convert. Newly planted or a young convert. And so, obviously the first thing that comes to mind is lack of training, lack of experience. Those are pretty obvious. He shouldn't be one who's just recently been saved, recently been a member of a church, or even recently answered the call to the ministry. It should be something that, there's been some time to show these qualifications, to show if he's aspiring to this, to meet this standard that the Lord has given, and some time to gain some of those experiences. I know that when I was coming up, we were encouraged, and I tried to, over some years that I was, from the time I answered the call, was actually about 10 years until I was called here. And that's quite a while. And I've always thought to myself, within myself, that was a little too long. I didn't take it serious for a while. And every day is a challenge to take the calling serious as well. It's not like you just all of a sudden start doing everything you're supposed to do. It's always a progression, but also, what is the appropriate time? Well, there isn't. Some minutes it's that kind of a time frame. Some minutes maybe less, maybe more. I know that one thing that I felt like was a good bit of advice and tried to do was to, in different times in the Springfield church when there was elections, is volunteer for different kinds of positions to gain a wide range of experience in teaching and leading out in different aspects. And so, that's experience and that's time. And I think all of that was helpful to me, and I think that's one of the first things you think of with this, is not a novice, not newly planted, not a young convert. But there's quite a bit of other, if you think about it, I think some other ways that this could play out, and maybe it's more taking into account the rest of the statement then, lest being lifted up with pride. And so we know pride is a problem, but in what ways could pride be problematic to the office of the bishop? And so I've got several things written down, but if there's other things that pop into people's heads, certainly share that. But pride can be problematic in a number of ways. One thing I thought of is, a pastor, because of the position, because of the way the world views that position in a church, or visitors that come, or if you're engaging with people that are in the community, sometimes the pastor gets treated with a great deal of honor, as far as like on man's level, on a mankind standard. And we know that biblically there is a proper amount of honor for the office, not exalting man, but to honor the office and show that reverence to the Lord through the office. But even beyond that, sometimes there's more. It's more of not necessarily to the degree of a worship, but there's more than that. And so a man who is to be a pastor, to be a bishop, needs to have the right perspective of that, to know who he really is, to know that he's a servant, to not let that go to his head, right? Keep that in perspective. So perspective is a very important thing. Pride can get in the way, and that's something that happens because he's a novice. So it's not just being lacking in experience, but it's maybe lacking in perspective, being able to see, because there are times where a young man goes to pastor, and all of a sudden he's the guy. He's the one. He's not the young preacher anymore. And he's not the apprentice. Now he's in the position. But it's a position of work. It's a commitment to serve with one's whole life. It's not to be looked at that way. So you can't let it go to his head. Also, another way that pride is problematic is the man willing to keep perspective when someone doesn't listen to his counsel or teaching? Does he take it personal? Does he get down, depressed? Or does he react and take it as a challenge? Feel that he has to go to war and he has to compensate and rise above the other person, asserting this authority that the office does have. And so he has to understand that all church members are sinners. The sin nature always resists correction. And so it's not about him. I mean, there are times it could be, but it's not necessarily about him. He doesn't need to take it that way and then feel like he has to go to war about that. That's a novice thing. That's a youthful perspective, or one that's lacking in experience in reality. Because that's, again, it can be. Sometimes there are those who resist the Lord's man that the Lord puts in an office, but it's not necessarily that, and that's also not just because even if it was that, doesn't mean he's got to go to war, and doesn't mean he's got to take it in the flesh and try to go to battle that way. Also, this pride can be problematic. If someone truly is resisting him and doesn't like him, is the man willing to listen? Is he willing to consider and try to adapt to become all things to all men? And that's a growth thing. Or is he set in his ways? And so, the reality is, sure, there may be people that a pastor, he's trying to minister, he's trying to teach, and they're just throwing it back at him. Okay, and he could have the position, well, I gave it, I put it out there, and they rejected it. But he's also supposed to have the compassion that the Lord would have. And sometimes that means taking it on the chin. It's the turn the other cheek. It's for the sake of the ministry, to not cause the ministry to be blamed. 2 Corinthians 6:3 mentions that way. And so he needs to be willing to, and again, the novice might, in that youth, in that lack of experience, might say, well, fine. They don't want to hear it, then too bad. And it's similar as any church member with witnessing and with ministering to people is we're supposed to be willing to take wrong. And we're supposed to be willing to suffer for the cause. And yeah, sure, there may be a time where it has reached that point where we've done all we can do and they're choosing their own path and we leave them to it. But we still don't take that personal. Who are they really rejecting? Rejecting the Lord and His truth. And so that, our job, and especially the man that's the bishop, is to be willing to adapt. And that in that early time, or sometimes he can be less than adaptive, and it could be years in. Another way that pride is problematic for the bishop is the man willing to take counsel and correction from other pastor brethren that are his elders. And not necessarily in age, but in the faith, in experience. A young preacher, he needs to learn humility. It's not it's not about exalting the older preacher brethren and worshiping, lifting them up, but it's about honoring the fact that if there are those who have given themselves to the Lord and they've been doing it for some time, they've gained some experience, that's valuable counsel. And so if this man is now, he's thinking he's all that, he's something special, and he doesn't need the old man's counsel, type of thing, and so he's going to treat that with disdain, that's a sign of a novice. If he's not willing to show respect, and I know for me in preacher school, there were times where, I've told this story before, it's what happened. There were times where Brother Ronnie Hall and I were the only two, and when it was said openly that the young preachers aren't doing their homework, not only did we know who that was being talked about, everybody else did too, and we had to be willing to swallow that, take that and learn some humility, and it wasn't always easy. But that was an important lesson to learn during that time, to take instruction. And yours, at that point, yours is not to rebuke. Yours is to listen and absorb and be the student. And so if a man is not willing, that's a sign of a novice. If he's not willing to, and if he's going to try to go toe-to-toe and fire back, that's not a good quality. And then another thing, does the man consider himself to be a student of the Lord, the Scriptures, and even dealing with people, dealing with adversity in his own life, etc.? Or does he think he's already studied, he's already prepared, he's experienced, he's got it figured out? So, always a student, and then, so a novice is going to, and it kind of goes back to one of the other points, letting things go to his head, or is he willing to keep learning and always have the attitude that, well, I'll look into it, I'll study it, I'll search it out. But now, part of the experience and part of the not being a novice, again, is that he has had sufficient time and training and then been investigated and examined by the church he's a member of, if he's been ordained, by the presbytery and the church he's going to pastor and so on. So there's a lot of examination there, but that doesn't mean that he has achieved or he's reached a level or now he doesn't have to listen. And so, at what point? At 3 years after answering the call, at 6 years, at 10 years, whatever it might be, his attitude should not change. He should always have the attitude of a student, and that's a sign of a novice. If he's got that attitude that he's already got the experience and the knowledge. And then this one, look at 1 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 12. So kind of, again, relating to some of the other points, but a little bit different twist. So 4:12 says, "Let no man despise thy youth, but be thou an example of the believers in word and conversation, in charity, in spirit, in faith, in purity." So, let no man despise thy youth. So whatever age Timothy was youth. He was younger. And so what's it saying? So and I think most commonly we think of, as the pastor, don't let someone look down on you because you're younger. If you're called of the Lord, if you've got the training, if you've given yourself to that training and if you're continuing to give yourself to that training, then let no man despise thy youth. But also, if you kind of look at it from this perspective, youth also shouldn't be an issue. Don't make it an issue. And the young man, the young preacher, or young pastor shouldn't make it an issue either. And sometimes that's a sign of a novice because he feels like he has to prove, he has to show that he's worthy to be in this position. And so then what's he going to do? He's going to overcompensate. And he's going to go overboard to try to prove. Now, proving is an important thing, but let's keep it in its proper perspective. So, Galatians 6, and that's what the time from his call to the ministry, when he answers the call to the church that he's a member of, and they license him, that begins the time of that church examining. And so again, however long that takes, that church is to be keeping a watchful eye, because the day will come if he continues to pursue that, and the Lord would have him go somewhere to pastor, then when that time comes, that church will need to be able to say, we've been watching him. We either feel like he's ready or we feel like he's not, and they'll question him and so on. But that, that's an important thing, that he have that time to prove himself. And primarily then, what are we talking about? What is the, who judges the young preacher? So first and foremost, it's the church of his membership, right? That's the church that knows him the best. It is going to be the pastor of the church of his membership, but it's the church, right? It's not meant to just be the pastor, and the pastor produces apprentices, and so on. But it is no doubt the young preacher's pastor is going to be the one most knowledgeable, and if he's going to be worth anything, he's going to be looking to his pastor to guide him and follow that example. He's not to become like him. He's not supposed to be a copy, but he's going to be wanting to look and aspire to that position. And then because if you have churches working together, and like we're familiar with in our work, we have churches that fellowship with one another, and we value the stand of our sister churches, and it is tradition, and it's biblical to call for the ordained help to come and examine a man. And so if you have churches working together, and you have a seminary type of school that is supported and sort of strengthened by those sister churches and by that fellowship, then that seminary school and those teachers and those other pastors and teachers that would teach there also become judges. Now, it's still a local church, but the point is if at some point in that man's life he's going to be ordained, and some of those men are going to ask the questions, and they're going to examine, they're going to be asked to lay hands on him, they're judging, they're watching too. Now, having said all of that, who's he really, proving oneself? Go back to the thing, at a novice, it's not about compensating and over, showing so you can prove to them, or you're trying to make sure that you're keeping up with a standard that has been told to you by brethren. But it's about proving oneself to the Lord first and foremost. And then the local church examines, and the local church asking for ordained help, and so on. But Galatians 6, verse 3, for if a man think himself to be something when he is nothing, he deceiveth himself. But let every man prove his own work, and then shall he have rejoicing in himself alone, and not in another. And so there is a time of proving. And it has its proper context. But what I want to caution, what I was saying with not a novice, is as one who's young in the faith or young in experience, that's going to be a tendency of one to, I've got to prove myself. I've got to show them. And so it's not that. The reality is, as 1 Timothy 4 said there about the youth, don't make an issue out of it. So maybe a stretch to some, but to me, I can't help but notice and I'll not get on tangent on social issues, but all of these things to try to promote minority races to gain equality, it's not getting equality. The better path to equality is just quit talking about it. Maybe that's my opinion, but it's just quit focusing on it. You try to lift up, now you're overcompensating. So, example, are you really doing justice to the black man to try to have reparations to those who are living now for sins of the past? Those people are dead and gone. Sure, they were done wrong, and maybe that, slavery, whatever it might be, is horrible. Now you're gonna promote, you're gonna pay people today, or you're gonna push them through the system and give them college and give them jobs just because of the color of their skin. That's racism. You're doing the same thing, it's just the opposite. You're trying to compensate. And so, like I said, maybe it's a stretch, but in my mind it's connected. It's like this young man, youth isn't an issue. Don't make it an issue. Those who would look down on the youth, fine, don't let them despise thy youth. But you also, just because you're younger, don't make that a thing. If you have answered the call to the ministry, and if that man has trained and he has now been examined and he's ordained, maybe he's much younger than others in the faith, but that's equality. And people shouldn't look down in the office because on the man because he's younger, and the man shouldn't think he's got to do different things because he's younger, and shouldn't think he's got to, he should understand that some people might have a harder time because he's maybe a lot younger, and he should be sensitive to that and not get offended by it, but he also shouldn't feel like he has to compensate. And it's just making an issue out of something that shouldn't be an issue, because what matters is the salvation, the baptism, the church membership, and then the call to the ministry and the training for that office. Those are the things that matter. All right, so go back to 1 Timothy. Any comments or questions? 1 Timothy 3. And it says there, not a novice, lest be lifted up with pride, he fall into the condemnation of the devil. And then moreover, he must have a good report of them which are without, lest he fall into reproach and the snare of the devil. So good report of them which are without, it's meaning outside the church. Without, that's those that are not a part of the church. So in the community. And it says, lest he fall into reproach. So report in that verse in the Greek means evidence given. So the evidence given of his witness or his presence in the community, and then reproach means contumely. And in the dictionary definition, contumely is insulting display of contempt in words or actions, contemptuous or humiliating treatment. So lest he fall into reproach. Contumely in the dictionary means insulting display of contempt in words or actions, contemptuous or humiliating treatment. All right, so good report of them which are without. So it's just the presence, the witness in the community. And again, I think I mentioned this last time, but there's to be a caution and a care about that, of course, but at the same time. This is, again, part of the novice thing, part of the experience knows you're not going to win everybody all the time. And, it's just like Jesus warned his disciples and regular church members to be mindful of. That, if you're going to stand for truth, you're going to try to be an ambassador for Christ. Some aren't going to want to hear it, and they're going to take it out on you. But he reassured them, but they're rejecting me. And so, even more so for the man that's to be a bishop, However, yes, he is to be concerned with that witness. Yes, he is to think about the appearance, his actions, what it would say about what the reflection is on Jesus, on the church, on the ministry, on the church that ordained him, on the brethren that laid hands on him, and so on. There's a lot of responsibility, a lot of thought. However, all of that really boils down to, if you just try to love the Lord and live for him according to his word, then what happens? Same thing as any church member. If you're always worrying about what people think, that's a problem. So you just focus on the Lord, putting him first. If he shows us that something is wrong in our life by his word, then we deal with that with him. And if it also wrongs someone in the community or in our circle or whatever, then we can and should show be apologetic towards them for making that mistake, and be sincere and be honest that we're not trying to be something we're not. And a lot of times that sincerity and that being real in front of people is a huge benefit, because people like others to be real. I mean, I don't like the fake, when you can tell that someone's being fake, or they're just trying to tell you what you want to hear. That's a sales tactic. They just want the sale, and it's just, I don't even want to be around it. So that's how we come across to people, just because we want them to see a certain thing about us. Well, then that's not really being sincere. That's not really we're not really doing what the Lord would have us to do. We're trying to please man. And that's not what this is talking about. A good report, but who are we really serving? We're supposed to be putting the Lord first. We're not trying to keep up to standards of man. So there's a difference there. All right. We already kind of talked about, and I already said I wasn't going to spend much time on the husband of one wife. That was earlier, but we kind of skipped over. In my notes, I put some more on it right here. But I think it's key that Matthew 5, 31 and 32, and Matthew 19, 1 through 12 are context of the Scriptures. You cannot focus, and so people have said in the past, when there's been battles over this and arguments, that what about the rest of the qualifications? You're putting all the emphasis on that. And again, there's two kinds of qualifications in this list, and I worded it this way: absolute and relative. I already mentioned this, but just touch on it again. Not given to wine and husband of one wife are absolutes. There's just no getting around those. Relative, and again, not that you can question whether the Bible teaches on them, but these other qualifications, apt to teach and sober and vigilant and so on, are things that are going to vary from one person to the next. Every church member, it varies from one person to the next. And there are things that the man who's to be a pastor can improve on if he's lacking. There are things he can grow in, but you cannot, reverse. If a man is divorced and remarried, he has two living wives, and those passages, Matthew 5, 31 and 32, and Matthew 19, 1 through 12, make it perfectly clear that that's how the Lord sees that relationship. It doesn't matter what mankind says. The Lord sees that as two living spouses. And it's the same for the wife. And the one who marries the one who's remarried or who's divorced is also committing adultery in that. You see that in those passages. All right. Any comments? Questions? Yeah.
Can you just repeat those verses in Matthew? Sorry.
That's okay. Matthew 5, 31 and 32. And then Matthew 19, 1 through 12.
Thank you.
All right, go to 1 Timothy 4 and verse 15 and 16, we'll kind of wrap up here. So, we have the list of the qualifications, chapter 3, 1 through 7, and then Titus. But, there's a lot of other statements that are also qualifications, or that, you just, as you study it out, you find that there's more, or it opens, it expands the knowledge or the reach of some of those things. So, chapter 4 here, verse 15 says, meditate upon these things, give thyself wholly to them, that thy profiting may appear to all. So I was looking at this and thinking of this, what we were talking about earlier, about not being a novice and not having to overcompensate and prove oneself in that manner, to try to make sure people know how knowledgeable someone is, or his experience, and feel like he has to tell them. You meet someone like that, it feels like they just have to let you know how smart they are. They just have to tell you all. They have to be the one in the room that's got everything figured out. So what is that? That's a sign of immaturity, actually, because if you're confident in who you are, you don't feel like you have to prove that. But this statement here, connected to what we're talking about, that thy profiting may appear before all. So what is that profiting? Okay, you look up that word in the Greek, it means progress or advancement. Okay, progress or advancement. And what I think in the context of what, rightly dividing it, progress and advancement in the Lord. When you live the life the Lord would have you to, He blesses it. And it's not always, it can be blessed with material, or it can just be blessed with stability. You might still have plenty of trials, but if you're putting the Lord first, you will be stable. You will have confidence in the Lord, and others will see that. That's the profiting that needs to be seen. So he's telling Timothy, meditate upon these things, give thyself wholly to them, that thy profiting may appear to all. So he's not saying, show everybody how smart you are, show everybody what you can do. Let them know. He's saying, you just meditate, you just do what the teachings say to do, and that will cause others to see what it looks like when someone is putting the Lord first. That's what he's saying. Verse 16, take heed unto thyself and unto the doctrine, continue in them, for in doing this thou shalt both save thyself and them that hear thee. And then last look at chapter 6, verses 11 and 12. So qualifications, and again, it's up to the local church, the church of a young man's membership, that is to be a pastor, to primarily examine him. But of course, a church that calls a man will also be examining him, and will, most likely, like I said earlier, we're fortunate in the work of churches that cooperate that way. If you have a church that's 20 hours from the nearest church of like faith and order, it's going to be very uncommon to ask for ordained help. It's not a necessity. If it's feasible, sure. And if churches can, they should. If it's feasible, they should. But the local church examines the man. So that's where the authority of Christ comes through the church to determine if he's fit for the office. And but again, if there is that element of being able to rely on some training that happens from a school of sorts, or brethren that will teach one another, or sometimes it might just be, if a church is kind of isolated, maybe it's just the pastor of that church is kind of the one that's leading and teaching this young preacher. Whatever it is, what does it boil down to? So kind of thinking of these verses here as just a summary then of what these qualifications are. But thou, verse 11, chapter 6, verse 11, but thou, O man of God, flee these things. And he was just talking about the riches and the love of money. Earlier, verse 5, perverse disputings of men of corrupt minds, and so on. He says, flee these things and follow after righteousness, godliness, faith, love, patience, meekness. Those should be the things that is able to be seen that the man is following after. If those are the things he's following after, if he's willing, verse 12, to fight the good fight of faith, lay hold on eternal life, whereunto thou art also called, and hast professed a good profession before many witnesses. Is he trying to put the Lord first? Is he striving? And it's not about perfection. It's not, he's going to make mistakes, but is he striving? And then when mistakes happen, how does he handle? When he realizes he stumbled, how does he have to justify it? Does he have to prove that he's better than that? Or can he be sincere? Can he be vulnerable? Can he show that he's a sinner like everyone else? That's what it is to put the Lord first. It's not about proving ourselves to one another or putting up a false affront to others. But is it that he is following after righteousness, godliness, faith, love, patience, and meekness? And, again, if he is, chapter 4, verse 15, the profiting will appear. It'll be there. The Lord will bless that in anyone's life who's willing to put those things into practice. If we seek the Lord first, he will provide. And again, he may provide with physical, material things, but he might just provide with being able to weather the storm better. He might just provide with not being crushed when there's crisis. And that's still the Lord providing if you put him first. Go ahead and close there then. No other word? Let's go ahead and stand. Word of prayer and dismiss them, and as we do, Sister Ella, would you listen?
Heavenly Father, just thank you for letting us be able to be here tonight. We just ask that you help us all to read this up and to apply it to our lives. And just help us all to be in prayer and study every day. And just please be with man that you're going to bring here, that we'll just be open and preparing himself, and that we'll all be preparing ourselves for that time. I just ask that you please be with all the prayer requests that you mentioned. Those are under Dr. Care, that you'll just bring them back to their health. We just ask that you please be with all those who are traveling on the roads this weekend, especially, that you'll just keep them all safe. And thank you for everything in their life. Thank you for letting me be a part of your New Testament work. I just ask that you please forgive me all my ways and doors that you please and I pray. Amen.